I finally watched Wakanda Forever, and I felt the messaging in the film was actually dangerous for Black and African people. Very dangerous. Some of you know I made a Black Panther video in which I said that film did more harm than good to Black people. Well, I found Wakanda Forever even more disturbing, especially at this time in history when the entire world is clamoring to control the land and resources of Africa. These are desperate times for humanity, and as you saw with my BRICS Death of the Dollar video, Africa is the prize for everyone. As such, as Africans, we truly need to protect our necks, which is why Wakanda Forever concerned me so much. This is not a movie review. It's a philosophical perspective on the messaging in the film as it pertains to Africa and the fabricated concept of Blackness. That is, after all, what we've been called, so from that perspective of Blackness, I will speak. Pay attention. The passing of Chadwick Boseman was a tragedy and part of the reason I didn't want to share my thoughts on Wakanda Forever. However, the film concerned me a lot. Enough time has passed now where maybe this video will go unnoticed and people may be more willing to consider a different perspective. In my first video, I said one of the fundamental problems with Black Panther was that they avoided all the natural enemies of Black and African people and instead had Wakandans fighting each other. In Wakanda Forever, there's an early scene where some French military operatives try to steal vibranium from Wakanda and are attacked by Wakanda's troops. When I saw this scene, I thought to myself, whoa, you mean I'm going to watch a film where Black Africans actually stand up against the West in a major motion picture? My delusion didn't last long. Sure enough, minutes later, the Wakanda Queen Ramona is in the UN chastising the officials. The Wakandans then bring out the captured French soldiers and not only let them go, but there are absolutely no consequences for the soldiers' actions. Talk is cheap. Actions speak louder than words. We all know this. Why exactly wouldn't the French try again when there are no consequences? Or another country using different tactics? What are we always told about bullies? Bullies are cowards, and the last thing they want to deal with is someone who fights back. Movies have been made about this. Entire campaigns have been made about this. Parents all over the Western world ascribe to this. Bullies are bad. Bullies must be stopped. You must never cave into a bully or it won't ever end. So why clap for Africans not doing what we've all been taught to do in the face of a bully? If the bully is Putin and Russia, we supply Ukraine with weapons to fight them. If the bully is France or America, we pat them on the head and say, don't do it again or else. Then we have Namor and his people, the Talokan. They appear and take out some soldiers on a ship with extreme ease for attempting to steal their vibranium. The Talokan do what Wakandans should have done. Wiped out most of the people that invaded their waters to steal their resources. We were being shown the same crime perpetrated on two minority populations and then shown two different ways of reacting to it. This wasn't subliminal. This was like direct rhetoric in your face. When you show Black folks getting disrespected and stolen from, we paid for the plane tickets of the thieves, likely first class with extra legroom, and we delivered them back home with Wakandan souvenirs and gift baskets. I mean, those guys looked healthy without a scratch on them. So let me ask you this. Who would you respect more, the Wakandans or the Talokans? If you study Western history, from Greece to Rome to Britain to the United States, all empires have proven one thing. The only language they utilize is force and shows of might. Anytime anyone harms the US or UK or even threatens their interests, they don't ever respond with anything other than military might or aggressive economic sanctions, which can be even more damaging to a nation. So why are these same societies making films showing Africans, the most abused continent in history, as pacifists? Then I realized, oh, I know what's happening here. The Talokans took out those invaders because the Latinos are being depicted as the villains of the film. Violent retaliation against the West for stealing from a minority group is being bonded, fused to villainy. while peaceful protest, turning the other cheek, in the case of Wakanda, black people is being bonded to heroism, nobility. This is what happened with Killmonger in the first film. He made too much sense in terms of black autonomous thoughts. He had to be a terrorist. The same thing Malcolm X was called, and MLK, and Muhammad Ali, and Mandela, and you get the picture. Anyway, Namor comes into the film, and he's rightfully angry that these Westerners tried to steal his minerals, and that Wakanda had inadvertently helped them build a machine that could source vibranium. Then Namor does the most ridiculous thing you can imagine. Instead of Namor and the Talokan attacking the US, he and his people attack Wakanda. That confused me. I mean, why don't you go after the actual people that put a hit out on you? Wakandans didn't try to steal your vibranium. The West did. America. It's like having your cake and eating it. You set up America as the villain, but you do everything to shift the repercussions for that villainy away from them and onto everyone else, specifically black folks. Then you can say you're being honest in showing America screwing Africa over for resources, but so what? Why the hell are black Africans paying for your crimes in the very same movie? If there's no consequences, you're just perpetuating the same real-world ideology that the West can go to Africa and use it for a playground and just walk away while Africans fight amongst themselves in the aftermath. This is the very reason we had civil war in Nigeria and why so many wars happened in Africa within a few years of independence from colonialists.
Big dream. Big hope. It was in a very romantic period.
This year, 17 African nations mark 50 years of independence from decades of European colonialism.
We didn't fight the West when we got freed. We fought each other because of what the colonizers had done in dividing us. I'll make this clearer. It's like if someone came and smashed up your house with a baseball bat. And instead of going after that person, you go after the manufacturer of the baseball bat. Or you go after your neighbor who sold the baseball bat inadvertently to the person that went on to smash up your house. How is that logical? This brings me on to another weird thing about this film. The fact that Namor and his people were Latinos. In the comics, Namor was either half white or at most possibly half Asian. So why was the Mexican Mayan culture chosen for the Talokan? I'm not saying this was inherently a bad thing, but this impacted my reception of the following events. Namor and his people beat up the Wakandans for almost the full duration of this movie. This film isn't called Talokan Forever, it's called Wakanda Forever. It's a movie that's supposed to empower black people and Africa, right? So why are black people in Africa getting beat up for the whole film by another group of oppressed people in a movie made by the culture that's oppressed both those groups? It's crazy. It's weird. Imagine taking my kids to the cinema to watch their supposed heroes get beat up over and over again. Why pay to see that when you can see black folks getting beat up or thrown in jail or worse, for free on the nightly news? The whole idea with these films is escapism in seeing black and African people winning. This continuous beatdown was odd, especially as Black Panther hadn't done anything in the first film except fight and kill other black people. Yes, there was Clow, but Black Panther didn't take him out himself. They had Killmonger do it. This just negated that whole thing because Clow was the enemy of Wakanda and by default Black Africa. So why can't Black Panther do the deed himself? Clow was South African, remember that? With a heavy Afrikaans accent, further pushing the anti-black villainy with the obvious apartheid connection. So why not allow the African hero to symbolically get vengeance for South Africa? Think about it. The main villain was Killmonger, and he was killed by another black man who was called a hero. It was really uncomfortable for me to watch under the circumstances of the society we live in. I don't want to see a black hero killing a black person who's advocating for black people. Not in a family fantasy film, under any circumstances whatsoever. Not now. What exactly is that meant to promote in us? That it is our duty to weed out and assassinate any black person using radical means to fight for our salvation? I take that back. That is exactly what it's meant to promote. My apologies. Regardless, this connects to the biggest issue with this whole thing. Why are Latinos fighting black people in a mainstream movie? What is this? Divide and conquer? Divide and conquer. A strategy by which someone remains in power by making sure that the people under their control quarrel amongst themselves and so cannot unite to achieve their aims and overthrow their leader. For the duration of the film, the CIA were absolved of all responsibility and depicted as pseudo-heroic saviors to Wakanda via the rogue agent Everett Ross on a number of occasions in the film. So on one hand, you're saying the CIA were responsible for screwing with Africa and Wakanda by getting this vibranium machine built, but then you have the main CIA character as a friend of Africa? In the meantime, the CIA experienced no repercussions from Wakanda or Africa for what they've done and are doing in their quest for vibranium, which we all know is a synonym for Africa's natural resources. This is bananas because the CIA has played a massive role in destabilizing Africa and African governments. How are you then making a film about an African hero and one of their best friends is a CIA agent? Come on. This was just insulting to me as an African, just knowing the history that I know. In the first film, they took Killmonger and turned him into a terrorist villain. He was a black man with justifiable rage and a desire to fight those that took from his people. In the sequel, they took Namor and turned him into a psychopathic villain. He was a Latino man with justifiable rage and a desire to fight those that destroyed his culture. Guys, there's no digging involved. This was all right in front of you. Now let's look at the proposal Namor made to Wakanda. White Europeans went over to America, wiped out the Native Americans, obliterated the Mayans and indigenous people in the South, pushing them out and creating a border for the United States on land that belonged to who we call Mexicans today. Suddenly, indigenous people, modern-day Mexicans, are called illegal immigrants on their own ancestors' land by European invaders of that land. The culture of those European invaders creates a media industry a few centuries later. That industry fashions propaganda that saturates global culture with movie and TV westerns, a genre depicting Native Americans and Mexicans getting killed by white cowboys. As children, we played cowboys and Indians. No one ever wanted to be the Indians because we knew how that story ended.
That which we are about to receive, we thank thee, O Lord.
The Indians die, the cowboys win. Guys like John Wayne and Clint Eastwood become icons of this genre, where Native Americans and Mexicans are regularly depicted as the villains and cannon fodder. The indoctrination via cultural assassination is so powerful that society accepts a major sports franchise with a racist logo and name for Native Americans, which only gets changed after major protests and boycotts decades later. Down the line, you then create a film depicting a hero from the Mayan culture, one that was wiped out by these European invaders. You actually show a snippet of the atrocities and say this is why he's angry. Then you turn that hero into a bad guy because he says he wants to use his power to intimidate his people's oppressor into never threatening their sovereignty again. In fact, the powers Namor has were gained as a direct result of the evil wrought upon his people by the white invaders. Another aspect actually depicted in the film. You see where I'm going here? You need more? Let's go. The United States developed the atomic bomb. A man called Oppenheimer was responsible for doing so and has a movie dedicated to him as an unwilling hero. A man who didn't want to build the bomb but had to do it to save America in the event someone else built it first. I have thoughts on whether he deserves a movie about him before a movie about the impact of what he created is made on that scale. However, for context, let's look at the impact of his creation. The atom bomb was dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki on the 6th and 9th of August 1945. The United States is the only nation in human history that has nuked humans, let alone civilians. What a lot of people don't know is that it was a surprise attack timed in the morning when the Japanese people were going to school and starting their day, so that it would have maximum human and psychological damage. We're talking men, women, children. The levels of calculated evil in this act was and is beyond comprehension. and is one of the most despicable things any country has ever done in war. Yes, the Japanese had attacked Pearl Harbor, but that was a military installation. Many movies have been made around that event, but none in the West about what they did in response to it. Most Americans and Britons can tell you about Pearl Harbor. It's mandated history in schools. Few Americans and Britons can tell you anything about Hiroshima and Nagasaki. After the US nuked Japan, the US went on to become the country with the largest stockpile of nuclear weapons outside of Russia. The US have also installed themselves as the nuke police, telling the likes of Iran whether or not they're allowed to have nukes. So how does all this connect with Namor and Wakanda Forever? The reason the US say they have nukes is as a deterrent to other nations acting out. They also argue that they used the nuke on Japan to shorten World War II and to act as a warning to other nations of what would happen to them if they did what Japan did. This is exactly what Namor is saying he wants to do, word for word. His proposal to Wakanda lines up with real-world previous, current, and future US and UK foreign policy. His proposal is what many Americans vote for, what the US defense budget is based on, what the Pentagon is there for, why the US spends billions of dollars a year on the armed forces and military bases all over the world. Probably in a lot of the countries of the people watching this video right now. Namor was asking African people to stand with him in doing the thing white nations have done for centuries and are doing now. This isn't historic. This is right now as you're watching this. In Wakanda Forever, the black people not only turn the Latinos down, but fight them to prevent them from going after the West that harm not only Latin America, but also Africa. For you to understand why this messaging is so damaging to blacks and Africans, you need to look at Western geopolitics and the concept of coalitions. Coalition, a temporary alliance of distinct parties, persons, or states for joint action. Some examples of coalitions: the G7, the Commonwealth, the United Nations, NATO, and BRICS. The idea of a coalition is that you're stronger together in fighting a common enemy than you are as individuals. Coalitions are also great for peacetime to maintain security against potential attack. It is war, however, where coalitions shine. In World War II, the US and UK formed a coalition to fight the Nazis, who only lost because of the Allied coalition. When it comes to black folks, Africans, the one group we should not be fighting are Latinos. I'm not talking about white Spanish people. I'm talking about brown South Americans. In turn, the one group Latinos should not be fighting are black people, Africans. These two groups, especially in the US, are natural allies because of their shared issues. You don't have to be friends to be allies. You don't even have to like each other. You just need common goals. Wakanda and Talokan should have united under a common banner to create the most powerful coalition on earth, where no Western nation would ever dare mess with Africa or Latin America again. It's straightforward. It's within the narrative. Mira, ni siquiera quiero entrar en por qué Namor y Talokan no han conectado a México, Colombia, Ecuador, Venezuela, Perú, Bolivia, Chile y más con vibranium para que puedan salir del infierno económico en el que están. Venezuela lleva años en crisis y a México también. La vendría bien la ayuda. Namor y Talokan deberían sentarse en esos países, pero ese es el mismo problema que tuve con Wakanda, que no ayuda a África. Conozco los problemas de Sudamérica porque he vivido allá muchos años. Lo vi con mis ojos. Entonces, crear una película que muestre negros peleando contra latinos no nos ayuda a ninguno. De los dos, cuando todos ustedes saben quién nos puso en la posición en la que estamos. No debemos ser enemigos. Ahora, no. I feel this is placation by indirect persuasion. Show a plan that the oppressed in the real world, blacks, Latinos, Native Americans, might consider valid, and depict this plan as fundamentally flawed, doomed to failure. The exact same thing that happened in the first film with Killmonger's desire to go around the world liberating black people. As I say, this is not a review. This is simply a perspective on ideology. And also, by the way, I'm not here trying to advocate for the black and brown coalition. Lord knows when black people need Latinos, things don't exactly pan out how you would want them to, as is evident from the demographics of all the recent elections and voting trends in America. I mean, you also had people protesting the actor cast as Namor being too dark-skinned. The colorism situation in South America is no joke. So I'm not here trying to act as if South America has love for black people. Regardless, Namor is a Latino hero. He was trying to symbolically protect their interests. And I felt extremely disturbed by how cowardly black people were presented in that moment. Wakanda doesn't seem to want to stand up for anyone with melanin, not even themselves. The next thing I'm going to say may upset some people, especially if you're Christian. However, try to see this as objectively as you can. I want to talk about forgiveness. This Namor guy rolled in and killed the Queen of Wakanda in her own palace. I thought, nah. Mr. Namor, I like you, but you've got to go down for that. You got to go down. Remember what happened with Bruce Wayne when his parents got killed by Joe Chill in Batman Begins? Bruce went to the courthouse to kill Joe Chill. But before Bruce could do it, someone else did it for him. This allowed Bruce Wayne to get his revenge without staining himself as a character who doesn't willingly kill. In the same movie, Batman allows Ducard to die when Batman says, "I don't have to save you," thus killing the bad guy without actually killing him. The point is, the person that grievously harms the hero's family cannot be allowed to survive the film without consequence. Serious consequence. The man who killed Uncle Ben in Spider-Man was called Dennis Carradine. Spider-Man corners him in a warehouse and the killer trips on a pipe and falls through a window to his death. So Spider-Man didn't have to kill him. He still had to die for consequence. In Superman the movie, when Superman was about to go and kill Lex Luthor for killing Lois Lane, Jor-El's voice stops him. Then Superman turns back time and brings her back to life. The film figures out a way to not allow the death of a person close to the main character happen without consequence on the perpetrator. I can't actually think of a situation in any comic book film where somebody killed the main hero's family member, let alone one of their parents, and the killer is actually seen, during the course of the film as part of the narrative and not like just anecdotal in the past before the film's events take place. And that killer gets away with it in the course of the movie. I mean, damn, Jack Napier, aka the Joker in Batman 89, fell off a rooftop even though Batman tried to save him. Again, the film figured out a way to create consequence while maintaining the character of the hero as a good guy. In Wakanda Forever, Shuri not only lets the man that killed her mother live, she actually becomes friends with him. Friends! I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Black and African people can't afford to have that kind of ideology drilled into our heads when the continent is in the condition it's in. My suggestion is to simply not create a story that necessitates vengeance. Namor didn't have to kill Queen Ramona in her own home. Don't have that narrative, and we don't have to have the Wakandans respond like weaklings. Black people need symbols of strength, not pacification. Africans need symbols of strength, not pacification. There isn't a single revolution in human history that has come about via passive resistance to oppression. So why are Black, African, and now Latin people being sold heroes that can't work together towards using the exact same tactics used on them? Then I sat back and thought, no, this is exactly how this had to go. How many times have you seen Black families of murder victims forgive the white killers in the courtroom? It's a trend as predictable as the sunrise. George Floyd's sister forgave Derek Chauvin, who didn't even ask for forgiveness. In the case of Botham Jean's killer, his brother went to hug the woman in the middle of the courtroom in one of the most outrageous things I've ever seen. Dylan Roof was a guy who went into a church, prayed with a group of Black people, and then killed them in cold blood. Some of the victims' family members forgave him right in the courtroom when the guy himself said he wasn't sorry for what he did. It was absolutely bizarre. I struggle to think of many high-profile cases of a Black person being killed by a white person where at some point I didn't see a headline about a member of the Black victim's family forgiving the killer. It's that common. The other way around though, a white family member forgiving a Black person for killing a white person in cold blood, even if that did happen, I can guarantee you it wouldn't be promoted all over the news and the tabloids. and the magazines and the blogs. It wouldn't. Why? Because that is not an ideology of strength or one that will deter such things happening again. I don't want to get too intricate with this, but there is a reason why colonizers and slave traders pushed Christianity on Black and African people, with a focus on forgiveness and the derision of revenge. They literally had Black slaves preach to other Black slaves about why they shouldn't even consider striking back against their oppressors, and that somehow the Lord would make everything right. Thing is, the slave owners never wait for the Lord. America never waits for the Lord. The UK never waits for the Lord. France never waits for the Lord. Italy never waits for the Lord. Belgium never waited for the Lord. Portugal never waited for the Lord. No, that's for Black and African people. Can you see what I see? Suri forgave the man that killed her mother not weeks or months after the act, but within a few hours. Guys, she forgave Namor within a few hours of killing her mother in her own home. It takes longer for my chicken curry delivery to arrive than it took for that to happen. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not promoting Black people and Africans to go on violent rampages. What I am saying is that promoting pacification and victimhood is very dangerous to a community that has and is being exploited and abused. The last thing you want to be telling Black and African people is to do nothing to defend themselves, a philosophy that would dissuade further abuse. Remember the analogy of the bully, something that the West promotes, of fighting bullies, like Putin, allegedly. You're doing that while at the same time making jingoistic movies like Top Gun Maverick that promotes white heroes getting in fighter jets to go right at the enemy, guns blazing, star-spangled banner in the air. Sure, they couldn't name the country in that movie that they were attacking, but we all know you can swap and replace the anonymous enemy with Russia, Afghanistan, Iran, China, or whoever else America is fighting. Besides, the list of US military revenge or rescue movies is enormous. The list of US espionage movies is even longer. Also, another thing, why was Nakia hiding in Haiti? Haiti has real problems. I urge everyone to read up on the Haitian Revolution. Then read how that history led to where Haiti is today. You can't have an African hero go and hide out in Haiti but not address their problems. Otherwise, just have her hide out in France or something. Once you pick a Black or African nation, you shouldn't be using them as a diversity special effect. You have to take responsibility for what that entails as a Black and African hero. At the very least, show her engage in some kind of effort to help them out as compensation for letting her stay there. Even that raises the question as to why Wakanda hasn't helped Haiti before now. Of course, doing that would open up a Pandora's box of politics with why Haiti is in the situation it's in and why all the aid that has allegedly been donated to Haiti relief from the Clintons, for example, has seemed to do absolutely nothing to alleviate the issues. I hope to do a video at some point on the Haitian Revolution and that whole Clinton thing. Haitian history holds many lessons for modern Africa, and it's crucial Africans know what happened there and how it connects to the present day. Now, there will be detractors to what I've said. I got a lot of them in my Black Panther video. So here is a selection of responses you'll see in the comments. It's just a movie, stop taking it so seriously. Wakanda didn't want to help Talokan because it would have exposed them. Wakanda are a neutral country who do not engage in aggression. Why can't you people be grateful? Always complaining. This is why we never get anything. You can't have everything at once, it takes time. This is an important step for Black people. You're a conspiracy theorist, you're too militant, and so on and so forth. This, my friends, is exactly what you're supposed to think. Without that attitude, most of the greatest atrocities in human history would never have happened. It's called apathy. And I will explain why anyone that tries to say these things is an example of just how effective mental manipulation can be in modern cinema and art. Movies, games, music, and art are all forms of human expression. Human ability to create art to elicit emotional response is what separates us from the animals. In order for you to get why Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, Top Gun Maverick, Avatar: The Way of Water are not just movies, you need to understand two things. One, the definition of propaganda. 2, the fact that in art, the artist is God, and the creator of art, within the confines of that art, can do anything. Propaganda. Communication that is primarily used to influence or persuade an audience to further an agenda, which may not be objective and may be selectively presenting facts to encourage a particular synthesis or perception, or using loaded language to produce an emotional rather than a rational response to the information that is being presented. A wide range of materials and media are used for conveying propaganda messages, which changed as new technologies were invented, including paintings, cartoons, posters, pamphlets, films, radio shows, TV shows, and websites. The propaganda machine is the most important element of any government or society and has quite literally changed the course of history. The British used anti-black propaganda in their efforts to justify their policies in their colonies, with cartoons and stories of savagery in African tribes to validate the need to civilize the people. In my video on Obavorowen, I told you how negative propaganda about Benin was used to validate the burning and looting of the Benin Kingdom by the British Empire. Anti-black and African propaganda meant the British population supported colonialism, as they were made to think it was for the good of the African savages. The Nazis used anti-Jewish propaganda with cartoons, books, and film to validate the Holocaust. America spent the first 70 years of Hollywood creating films, TV shows, and cartoons with negative stereotypes of black and Native American people, which helped to support legislation such as mass incarceration and the war on drugs. This is all documented, and you can read about Reagan's heavy use of propaganda to place the drug epidemic squarely at the feet of the black population, with a focus on crack cocaine as opposed to powder cocaine used by the affluent in white suburbs. This messaging was pushed through film and TV so that the population formed a strong negative opinion of the black crackhead, thus validating harsh treatment in the justice system. The inverse has occurred now, where the drug problem is seen as a public health crisis because prescription drug abuse is primarily affecting more white people. This is all propaganda, and you cannot say the films with black criminals, drug users, and pushers were just movies. These things matter and have an effect. So when people try to justify what happened in Black Panther as, well, if Wakanda opened their borders, then they'd have been attacked. Wakanda couldn't team up with Talokan in Wakanda Forever because Wakanda are a neutral country like Switzerland, so it would be against their code, and on and on and on. The story did not have to be written that way. This brings me on to point 2. The artist within the context of the story they create is God. They have the power to decide what the story is going to be and who the characters are, especially in superhero fiction, that many of my detractors have said makes these works exempt from criticism. For you to then argue your criticism of my points based on the world of Wakanda is ludicrous, because the world was made to be that way to justify the narrative. Gaddafi and Mugabe had a plan for a united Africa. These were plans that were pushed in real life. You know how that story ended. But do you think Wakandans couldn't make those plans work in a fictional world? The reason why this will never happen in these films is that it would inspire this to happen in reality. It will give hundreds of millions of Africans a vision of an Africa they could never imagine could be. One where they control their resources and destiny. One that promoted unity and coalition over division, classism, and racism. The enemy of Wakanda is the very Western culture that created Wakanda. Therefore, there is no way they can fight them, because victory for an African hero would be the destruction of that Western structure and Hollywood as the propaganda of that structure. It cannot happen, not out of the West at least. Finally, and this is the most important part, heroes in Western culture have always inspired an ideal, something to strive for. Jor-El told his son Kal-El, who we know as Superman, that he sent him to Earth to inspire humanity to be all they could be. Thomas Wayne told Bruce Wayne, "Why do we fall? So we can get back up." White heroes never reflect the worst of Western culture. They inspire the best. So why as black people are you content to see us shown exhibiting traits that don't unite us? Why? Why do I see comments like, well, black people do fight each other, all we do is kill each other, Africans are always at war with each other, the movie is just depicting reality? Whose reality? How sad is that? How sad that we are willing to accept that image of ourselves. If white heroes were created the way Black Panther was, we'd have a Superman, Thor, Iron Man, and X-Men that invaded worlds, stole resources, killed for personal gain, and pitted families against one another so they could attain dominance over them. How well do you think those heroes would do at the box office? And do you think white people would be flooding comment sections to argue that, hey, it's just reflecting the truth about us? Those are my thoughts. But hey, I'm just a guy on a social media app I don't own. I guess it's just a movie.